Okay, welcome everybody to the 4Power Forum, where leaders come to share. This is a big day in the history of 4Power Leadership, my new company that's been in business now for a little over 15 months. This is our inaugural webinar, and I'm very proud to have started this, and it'll be a monthly event. So I hope you enjoy it and that you come back time and time again and draw value from this webinar. Tonight's topic I'll be presenting is corporate values don't work, and here's why. And it'll be a good look at how corporate values shape cultures within companies and what we can do to bolster the conversation in corporate values to help leaders grow and lead their companies more effectively. Speaking of effective leadership, one of the most important tasks that a leader faces is to communicate effectively. And effectively not only in spoken word, but also in all types of mediums these days. So I'm proud to have with us tonight Mike Parkinson from 24 Hour Company. And Mike specializes in helping leaders communicate effectively. And so Mike will tell you a little bit about what 24 Hour Company does. I've witnessed their work up close myself, and they are extraordinary graphic artists that can help enhance any presentation or website. Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for being here this evening. I think we could all agree that leaders know that people make quick decisions, very, very quick decisions. People usually go with their gut. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Herbert Simon, who was a Nobel Prize-winning scholar at Carnegie Mellon, proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that most corporate decision-making in America is made on gut. We simply don't have the time to measure all the variables. What they've gone on to figure out is most people make the decision that way. Communicating in a clear, compelling, memorable way increases success. Doesn't matter how amazing your idea is if it's not understood, or worse, it's misunderstood. People do not make, and I'm guessing you're the same, we don't make decisions, or we don't make it a habit of saying yes to things we don't understand. That's where the graphics come into play. That's exactly what we do. Great graphics increase success rates, 43%, according to research done by 3M. So the question is if this is common knowledge in the professional world, why don't more people use graphics? Well, I suspect that one reason is because of cost. For that reason, I have something you can download called, it's a PDF for top 10 websites for low cost and free graphics. It's where I go to get things when I don't have a lot of money and time. So if you log on to if you go to this URL at the bottom, sign up for our e-zine. We do not spam. We hate spam too. You'll get every other month, you'll get an e-zine with amazing articles from people who are industry leaders and thought leaders. You can use it if you want. If you don't want to, that's okay. Bottom line is you get instant access to this tool. Knowing that clear communication is critical to success, Dan will now share some of his secrets that, if applied, will definitely increase our success rates.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate that background. Now, this is a little background on me. I believe most of the people online know me, but we will also have guest speakers in future installments of the 4Power Forum, and this is where I'll typically introduce the speaker for the evening. But my background is mostly in the federal contracting space, with also 4 years served in the military. And when I look back over my career these days, it's hard to believe that so much time has gone by, and that 26 plus years of that 30 plus year career has been spent in a variety of leadership positions. With that, about maybe 15 months ago, I decided to start up 4Power Leadership so I could share the knowledge that I've gained over the years. I also wrote a book that many of you have heard about already, also called 4 Power Leadership, Your Pathway to Leadership Success. And that took about 2.5 years to put together, based again on my experiences and research. And I believe it's a fresh look at leadership, because most leadership texts will tell you that all you have to do is follow some cookbook formula and all of a sudden you'll be a great leader. I share good, solid advice, but I also let the reader consistently know that leadership takes hard work, it takes commitment, and you have to be dedicated to the work of learning to be a great leader in order to be effective. So I will tell you a little bit more about services and things that I do at the end of the presentation, so let's dive in right now to our topic. So I started with an old premise: corporate values don't work, and here's why. I took a little analysis project on late last year. I think it was about November, and I was really curious to see what mission and value statements in major corporations really talked about, and whether or not they were good tools to influence leaders and to actually help leaders throughout a corporation shape the culture of the organization. In the end, these mission and value statements, that's exactly what they're designed to do. They're designed to create an identity for the company and to also let people latch on to something about what their company means and what it stands for. But the results of the analysis was somewhat disheartening when you put it in context of what the core of leadership is truly all about. So here's the burning question. I like to have this as a little bit of a trademark thing I do with every presentation that I do. What is the burning question? And tonight, are typical corporate values adequate in establishing an ethical culture of leadership? So let's take a look at what exactly is at the core of great leadership. When we think about great leaders, we automatically hope that we have leaders that have sound values or ascribe to really good values. And values, though, are very closely tied to the character of the leader. Leadership and character are inseparable, much more inseparable than character and true management. Managers can follow policies, do exactly what a company tells them or some guidebook tells them, and they'll be within the boundaries of performance for what a corporation or an employer expects of that manager. But leadership depends very much on what the leader feels inside and what their character is like. So then we have to ask the question, if values depend on sound character, how is character developed and what does it depend on? Well, that is represented by what I call the golden orb there in the middle, and it's the heart and core of leadership. So using your chat boxes, actually, would anybody like to take a stab at the answer? What's at the core of great leadership? And I'll give you a big hint. It also starts with V, but it's not values. Take a shot, folks. Use your chat boxes. Okay, we have vision from Mike. Anybody else would like to take a guess? Well, what I look at it is it's virtues, good old-fashioned virtues. And it's a word that hopefully we don't hear, unfortunately rather, we don't hear very much when we think about leadership in the modern context. But virtues are really the fundamental building blocks of leadership. And if we think of this, another metaphor, as a house, virtues are the bricks, character is the mortar, values are the walls, and together all those three things sustain the structure, which is leadership. So virtues are at the core of great leaders. And if we examine great leaders over time, which will probably be the subject of a future webinar, and if that's not a good tease, I'll work on my teases. But basically, virtues are at the core of great leadership, and if you think back of all the greatest leaders over the course of history, they were extraordinary at adhering to good, sound virtues. Culture is heavily influenced by what we talk about. What we talk about shapes us constantly. The signals that we receive from other people shape us constantly. So, as I mentioned, I took on an analysis of major corporations to see what was shaping the conversations. Now, we should be so lucky to think that people actually talk about mission and value statements in corporations. But the reality is, I doubt that many people can even recite what the mission and value statements are from companies. I've worked for many companies. What we're going to do is, please keep your mics on mute, all right? And no problem. We recovered. Okay, I'm hearing we got a little bit of issue with sound. Hopefully that'll clear up. But mission and value statements, most of the time, people that work for large companies can't even remember what the mission and value statement is for their organization. And I've worked for many large companies, and most of the time what I found is those mission statements were so complicated and so drawn out that you really couldn't commit them to memory unless you had a really, really concerted effort to try to do that. But what I did here and what you're looking at is a word map that was created by taking the mission and value statements of the top 20 companies in the Fortune 100. And I was curious to see if any virtues-related words appeared here. And as you can see, we didn't do very well. Basically, the result is that was all I could find, was those three circles there. And I took actually a magnifying glass out to try to read this and make sure I didn't miss anything. But, you know, leadership, remotely related to virtues, ethical, and the word honest at the top was all I could find. So this was a little bit disappointing that the words that were being used in mission and value statements were really disconnected from virtues, and therefore I wondered how much they could possibly be influencing leaders and giving leaders effective tools. So then I looked at what are the most common corporate values that I found, and the first one that popped up is everybody professed adherence to ethical behavior. But in reality, when you look at what they were actually talking about, ethical actually meant legal. And the corporation spends a lot of time when they talk about ethical behavior discussing the things that people should avoid to create situations where the company might actually be sued. And unfortunately, that's the focus of what they mean by ethical behavior. But when we look at virtues, it's really much broader than that and a much more important topic. The next most common value was we will take really good care of our customers because they're important to us. And of course here I'm paraphrasing the actual quotes because they varied somewhat between companies. But really a focus on customers, of course, you know, you cannot discount that that's important. Because customers are the lifeblood of a business, so of course there should be a focus there. But again, no mention on virtues and leadership. The next one is, we'll be really nice to the environment. A very common one these days when we consider all the attention that we're generating over environmental issues. And then lastly, there's always a statement, our employees are so important to us and they're amongst important resources, so we'll take really good care of them too. Now, these statements, I don't want to belittle them. And Elaine, we'll have to keep your mic on mute, please, so we don't get an echo. Thank you very much. And the statements are important because they do have a purpose, but again, they're not effective from shaping a culture of leadership. So leadership made simple. Leadership is made a lot more complicated than it really is. Now, leadership made simple should not be confused with leadership made easy, because leadership is never easy. But the concept of grasping what's important in leadership is simple. And what I wanted to do when I established the framework for 4-Power leadership is to have something that people could remember and use immediately as a way to gauge their leadership skills. And this is in direct contrast to the complexity of what I was talking about in mission and value statements. So I developed what I call the 4-Power framework, which has, hence the name, basically 4 powers that all leaders must master to be effective. And the first is poise. And this is all about the internal you, the internals of the leader. It's about mastering yourself and mastering your emotions and your value system. Poise then gets manifested into good, strong leadership presence. Presence is about how you consciously project yourself to the external world. And the greatest leaders maintain authenticity. This is not about projecting a phony image. It's about projecting the most authentic and real you for a specific purpose to convey confidence and inspiration to the people that you lead. Next is performance. No matter who you are and what leadership role you're in, never forget that the ultimate success of a leader is based on whether or not they achieve results. That's how they're judged. Leaders are paid to achieve results, and if you think about it, without the results, there would be no need for leadership. And then lastly, persistence. The best leaders are tenacious and they never give up. They have an attitude that their goals are not negotiable. When a goal is important, people are relentless. Strong leaders are relentless, and they pursue it to the greatest extent of their energy. And there is the framework of 4-Power leadership. So let's talk a little bit about poise. Poise is very interesting. You'll hear the word poise a lot if you tune in sporting events. I was watching the Final Four last night. Great game for those who are basketball fans. I really enjoyed it. And I heard the word poise constantly, about 4 or 5 times throughout the telecast. And we think of poise generally as a coolness under pressure in particular, an ability to perform under pressure. And certainly that's an aspect of the definition. It's a sense of composure, as you see here. But what really caught my attention is the phrase self-possession. And self-possession implies ownership. And when I started thinking about what we want to own when we are poised, it's 2 things. It's to maintain ownership over our emotions and, of course, over our value system. And that's what we really need to focus on as the foundational elements of all leadership, is our emotions, keeping them in check and under control, and then what we believe. These 2 are very closely tied together. Our emotions influence what we believe, and what we believe also influences how we feel in a very big way. So these 2 ideas are tied very, very closely. And then a little quote with apologies to Redskins fans here in the metro area, because it's the great coach Tom Landry, nemesis of the Redskins. But he had a great quote: leadership is a matter of having people look at you and gain confidence, seeing how you react. If you're in control, they're in control. And that is the essence of conveying your poise and how it manifests itself into a powerful leadership presence. Now this looks really inviting, a glass of fine wine. And I'm reminded of a story when I think about wine in general. This famous scene, if you've ever seen the movie The Jerk with Steve Martin and Bernadette Peters. And there's one scene where Steve Martin is sitting in a beautiful French restaurant, laid out with gorgeous linens, crystal chandeliers in the decor, just the most elegant place. And I hope you've all had, from time to time, the pleasure of dining in such an establishment, a classic French restaurant. The waiter, with a very thick French accent, walks up to Steve Martin and says, would Monsieur care for another bottle of the Chateau Latour? And Steve Martin looks at him as being of new money and uncultured. He says, ah, yes, but no more 1966. Let's splurge. Bring me some fresh wine, the freshest you got. No more of this old stuff. This year. As the waiter walks off, shaking his head incredulously, Steve Martin turns to his wife, played by Bernadette Peters. He says, he just doesn't realize that he's dealing with sophisticated people. Well, Steve obviously valued the new over the old, or Steve's character in the movie. And I can understand a logic of that, where we value new things. Certainly in technology and many areas of our lives, the new things are better, and we've improved our ways in our lives in so many ways, rather. But when it comes to leadership, the old wine is the best kind. And I set this up for you because what you'll see in a minute is some of the finest old wine that mankind has ever created. This table represents something that Aristotle, famous philosopher, actually introduced to humanity in 300 BC. And it's not very complicated. It'll sound complicated, but it's really not. And his theory was that virtue resided between two extremes, and he called it the theory of the mean, the theory of the mean, where essentially the extremes, either deficiency or excess of virtue, represented vices. So his point was that virtue is not absolute, that there is some room for interpretation, but that generally, as more and more people got together, you could, if you discussed the topic, you could agree on where virtue resided between these two extremes. So a good example is honesty, very simple, that obviously if you are totally deficient in honesty, you drift towards deceitfulness and you turn out to be a liar and you can't be taken seriously. No quicker way of undermining your leadership than sacrificing your honesty, of course. But then also excessive honesty, too much honesty, also leads to naivete. By that I mean that what if everything that crossed your mind came out of your mouth? Wouldn't that be awful? And so also knowing when to withhold your full expression of the truth to spare someone's feelings or to get into deep trouble. So like if your wife should ask you, honey, does this dress make me look fat? How do you answer a question like that? And you could say, no, dear, it doesn't. It's actually that jelly donut you've been eating every night that's doing it. And I'm sure you'd get into some serious trouble if you were that blatantly honest. So that's just an example. And if you think about these virtues, right, you want to keep, obviously in the middle of the extremes and have conversations in the community of what it means to be around the mean of virtue, or the center. Aristotle also believed that to be virtuous, quote unquote, one had to pursue all of the virtues, excellence in all of the virtues. And you couldn't just try to just be humble and ignore everything else. It wouldn't make you virtuous. And that's very true, because there's an interplay of the virtues, and if you ignore one of them, or if you're heavily deficient in one of them, it begins to undermine the other virtues, and overall your leadership position erodes over time. The next thing I did, and what I did is a little value add, believe it or not, to the brilliant and incomparable Aristotle, but I took virtues that I thought were really, really important to leadership, and then I organized them in accordance with the 4 powers of leadership. And that's what you see here, how 3 virtues are grouped under poise, and then I have 4 more under presence. And then the virtues associated with performance, and then finally the lone virtue that's associated with persistence, which is tenacity. Now, there's a much nicer layout of this chart. I want to direct you to my website there, where you see 4powerleadership.com at the bottom of the presentations on every slide, so don't worry about copying it down. Many of you have already registered to my website, so you know how to get to it. But if you go to 4powerleadership.com, there's a search box at the very top, and if you type in Table of Virtues in the search box on my website, it'll take you to a hidden free downloads area. And you're welcome to download the PDF of the file and keep it, and it's a much nicer printed format, and it's great reference, something that you can read over and think about. So once again, just type in Table of Virtues in that search box and you'll get it. So one of the things that we want to do with the 4Power Leadership Forum is generate discussion. So I prepared discussion questions here, and what we can do is basically, I'll invite people to comment, but I will also post these on the LinkedIn discussion group, which is 4Power Forum. And if you haven't joined that, as long as you search on that in LinkedIn, just search on 4Power Forum on LinkedIn, and you'll be able to get to it. And you'll see these questions posted there in the discussion group. And you can comment there in writing and share it with everybody on LinkedIn. And we can also try to talk about them tonight as much as we can here on the webinar. So basically, I've done this presentation live many times, and I usually set up a pro and con scenario where I ask one portion of the audience to take on the pro approach and one portion to take on the con, and to think of reasons why it's not feasible to reinforce virtue within a corporate setting, or whether or not it is feasible and it should be done. And a lot of interesting dialogue happens, and that I'll be interested to see what you all have to say as well. And then think about also, when you download the Table of Virtues, how does deficiency in a specific virtue affect the other virtues? And you can pick any one of them and think about how, if I am not good at one of the virtues, or I'm deficient or excessive, what impact does it have on the others? And then lastly, if you had to pick one virtue that, quote unquote, makes all the other virtues possible, which one do you think that would be? So those are some thoughts. I'll flip back right now to the Table of Virtues here, and hopefully some of you have downloaded the table by now, and you can take a look at it, and we'll try to generate some discussion. But any comment on any of those three questions? Do you think that we should teach virtues? And just use the bar at the top for those who joined late. There's a mind mood control, and if you mouse over that, you're able to raise your hand. So if you want to make a comment, you can just use the raise your hand. I'll see it, and then I'll click on you and unmute your mic for you, and you can chime in. Okay, Mike. Mike, go ahead. There you go. You're on.
Hey, I forgot control of my muting myself. Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be a very, very wise decision to instill or weave virtue into any training for leaders. If for no other reason than to have a common vocabulary or a definition of what is acceptable, a bookend, so to speak, because one person's definition of honesty or with examples may not necessarily dovetail with someone else's. If there's a disconnect, bad things tend to happen.
Mm-hmm. Very good, Mike. That's exactly true. I agree with that. And of course, the more that an organization or community discusses these virtues, the more people begin to form a norm and the culture gels in an organization. So, what do you think about, what virtue would you pick? Which one do you think basically undermines all the others or makes all the others possible? And I'll put one chart back up here. You could take a look at that, and then the previous chart as well. So we have dignity, temperance, humility. Any thoughts there, Mike?
I see that Marianne from Fairfax said dignity, and at first I wasn't sure why she might have said it, but actually dignity makes a lot of sense because what was the old saying, or if you're on a plane it says, put your oxygen mask on before you put someone else's on. And I think that inward focused understanding, belief, that foundation needs to be present. So without a lot of thought, I'm going to agree with Marianne here. I suspect that there's other points of view that are fantastic, but that foundation, that dignity, that internal belief in oneself and understanding, and the things that go with the term dignity seems to make a lot of sense as a core virtue.
Yeah, and I don't believe that there's any really one single perfect answer to that question. And what the reality is, here's another good one: prudence, humility, wisdom, and discretion, all good too. Because, as I mentioned, one of the characteristics of these virtues is that severe lack in any one of them drags the others down. Right? They're all related. And if you think about a person, who lacks, for example, and this is the one I always use, it's good, industriousness, right? It's about the ability of getting things done. So that a real good example, a real world example of that is somebody who is involved in a project. Say he's a project leader or she's a project leader. And the individual is not very industrious, fails to pursue potential solutions when a problem occurs, and then becomes embarrassed and begins to falsify the status of the project. So right away there, you see how lack of industriousness actually begins to impact honesty. And that's an example of how they are interplay, or how they're interrelated. So Marianne's answer there of dignity also is a good one too, because if someone doesn't have a sense of self-worth, right, how bold will they be in asserting the other virtues or taking a good leadership stance? You've got to have a good, solid sense of self-worth and a pride in your own character. That's very foundational. It's tied to poise, so that's a really good answer as well. All the other ones that Belinda shared with us, the prudence and humility and wisdom, discretion, all of those are really good. Prudence, judgment. If a leader is rash or can't make decisions, then all of the other virtues are also impacted, and their leadership ability is also eroded as well. So those are good good answers and good feedback. And again, not a perfect answer, but sharing a quote from one of the leadership greats that I admire, Winston Churchill. He favored courage, and I basically listed as fortitude because it's a little broader than courage, because it involves really a mental toughness and emotional strength. But Churchill cited courage. Courage was the virtue that made all the other virtues possible, was his quote. And the reason he said that is because anytime we take a stand based on virtue, it requires courage. And leaders must usually take a stand for something, or they are not perceived as really good leaders. So that was his quote, but then again, like I said, no perfect answer, and all of the feedback was outstanding. Thank you for those who shared it. So moving on here, like I said, I'll post these discussion questions. If you have a great thought you want to share, just go out to LinkedIn later on this evening or tomorrow, and you'll be able to post what you think there. So don't forget that thinking is influenced by those around us, and most effectively by the words that we hear. And when we saw the kind of mealy-mouthed, non-committal, general value statements, they don't really stir us inside. Plus, they're worn out because so many corporations have copied them and reused them over and over. But the words of virtue never fail to stir the emotions inside of us, and that's what makes them really powerful words. So when you use those words to shape cultures, they automatically kind of ping us inside and cause an emotional reaction. Then secondly, what does a community think? What do people around me think is important? Because wherever we see people putting emphasis, that's where we put our individual emphasis. And next, do we get consistent communication? Are the right thoughts consistently enforced by management and what we receive from our leaders? And then lastly, the all-important, what are others doing? The leadership by example. What are my leaders actually doing? Are they walking the talk? Very, very important. So what's the call to action here? The call to action is to basically speak about these topics fearlessly. Talk about the virtues that really matter. You go to the website, you download what I shared with you in the table of virtues, and you have a guideline by which to structure the conversation. And if you ignite that conversation, initially you might feel awkward, you might feel strange about talking about these virtues, but then the conversation begins to norm out. And I basically even went through that myself. When I first started talking about virtue, I was very self-conscious. I said, who uses that word these days? And I said, well, that's part of the problem. I said, so I'm going to start using it, and I'm going to start talking about it every chance I get. So again, here we'll take a little pause. If you have any questions at all on the topic, fire away right now. Feel free to use your text box or raise your hand. Any questions are good questions, so be fearless if you have one. Share it. Okay, I don't see anything coming through just yet, but okay, Melinda saying something. You started off with mission and vision statements. Okay, I can unmute you if you'd like. Go ahead, Belinda. I might be able to hear you if you want to talk.
Oh, well, there you go. Hi. It was too much to type out for today, but my question is, you started off today with talking about various statements of companies and, of course, igniting that true leadership and commitment of folks in your company. And so today we talked about virtues and, various virtues that are extremely important to shaping the way people think and how we operate in a company ethically. And some of those words, to your point, that was a good representation you had of that those words are rarely used. Not sure why, but what would you recommend? Have you seen a good mission vision statement that is reflective of virtues, is aligned with what you're seeing as that action to leaders in a company?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to put you on mute for a second, and then I'll allow you to come back in just so we don't have any echo or issues. So, yes, that's a great question. First of all, simplicity is a huge component. A really good mission statement is something that people can walk past each other in a hallway and share with each other as they're walking by. And that's a really good test. If you can say something to somebody, right, that focuses, number one, what your mission is and what you do. Now, it can be anything. Like I used to have an organization, for example, in my last assignment, where our job was to produce solutions for federal bids. I had a very simple mission statement. It was 2 words: win deals, win deals. And so people could walk by each other and say that mission statement. Now, you say, well, that doesn't have any virtues in it. That's correct. But underneath that, I said, okay, this is why we're here, and this is our mission. But then we had a dialogue. I had off-sites, and where I talked about the culture, the necessity for cooperation, for industrious behavior, getting along, telling the truth, and all of these things. So I was trying very, very strongly to bring the group together on that basis. So number 1 to your question is simplicity. Number 2, the second part of your question that I heard was, have you seen really good ones? Yes, I have. There's one company where I go regularly to participate in similar meetings related to leadership, and they have an excellent display that's right in the front as people walk into their office every day, and they use many of the virtues-related words, like honesty, integrity, all kinds of things that, are much more closely related. But I would think that we should start with the virtue words, and then derive what they mean in your context and to your customers, and how you apply them daily in your job. Also, our leaders, right? When somebody is in a meeting and they would mention a course of action, what is the honorable thing to do? You see, when you start using those words there again, you're reinforcing the culture. Other possibilities for leaders to pick a virtue word of the week, right, or the month, and really talk about it and expand upon it and have people involved in applying it, or talking about stories of how they applied it. So those are ideas that I have. And I'm going to take you off mute again, Belinda. So does that kind of answer your question, and any follow-up that you'd like to share?
It does. I like the answer of simplicity. I like the answer of considering starting with a virtue. But you're right. I know the environment you're talking about, and to start a meeting with saying, is that the honorable thing to do? Most people look at you like, with head cocked to the side, if you will. So, but it comes back to where you start and how it comes down from the top, the leadership and the culture you do shape and you want to shape, and you got to stay with it. And I also like the idea of switching those versions maybe quarterly, semi-annually, or annually.
Yes.
So, yes, thank you.
Okay, great. And again, there, it's about consistent communication, as I mentioned, about how thoughts are influenced, and the leaders have to consistently communicate. It's a challenge. It takes a lot of energy, but that is the central focus of leadership. So I'm going to start proceeding on our wrap-up. Again, there's my contact information for anyone who wants to reach out to me. I speak for a living. I do keynote seminars, and I provide mentorship to budding leaders. I also do presentation coaching, specifically in the federal space for oral proposal support. Those are the services I provide. So, as I always say, one of the best compliments you could pay a friend is to refer them to a client. So don't keep me a secret. If you see an opportunity where I can add value by coming in and doing a speech at an organization you know about, please share it, and I will gladly follow up with you. So a parting thought that I have for us, here we go, smiling face. Some people know Kathleen Ferris, next month's speaker. This is awesome. We're going to have a guest speaker, Kathleen Ferris, who is also a former senior vice president, Fortune 100 company, and former colleague of mine. She will be speaking on hiring the right people. And as we know, leaders are nowhere without their team. There is no leadership without a team. So how do you assemble a team? How do you create a great environment? By starting with good, solid people around you. And that's the topic she's going to explore on May 13th. It will be a very similar format to this, so look for the announcements, and there'll be similar topics that come up over time. Also, if you want to be a presenter, anyone on the call ever wants to be a presenter, just reach out to me on my email contact, and I'll follow up with you, and I'd be glad to entertain the possibility of you speaking. We have sponsors. We already have a sponsor for the next session in May, but if you know people that wish to sponsor and you want to share that with somebody, let me know, because it's a great exposure, and this will be posted on my website, and the sponsor will get exposure in perpetuity, as they say. So this is the start of great things for Power Leadership, and also for all the people that participate on these webinars. So the parting thought here from the great Winston Churchill, one of my leaders that I hold in high esteem. Here he is, using the virtue words. All great things are simple, and many can be expressed in single words. Freedom, justice, honor, duty, mercy, and hope. Thank you, everyone, for joining this evening. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. And just remember to make every day a 4-Power day. Thank you very much.